and then they're checked to see if they actually collide with the ground and the pedestal. So when they do that, they're sent over here and they go into the floor splash cycle. This is where they have, you know, the spray particles and also the animated geo. So this is basically setting it up to have a splash of particles emitted from the ogre when a raindrop hits it. So we obviously have these 4 particles which produce this little spray of droplets. They go flying off and go down and land on the ground. So we have a higher concentration of splashes underneath the ogre. And then out of those 4, the 5th one is then sent on to have another effect applied to it. The 5th one goes into here, which is called start dribbles at 0 speed. We spawn once again, and this time we take that 1 particle and we change it into another 4. Again, we delete the parent to make sure we just have 4 particles, and we reset the particle age. We use speed by surface, and we've got it to set speed once, and that basically aligns the particle with the surface of the ogre, and that's used for the next event here, which I'll go into this now because it's probably less confusing. When that particle is aligned with the surface, it's then actually changed into an animated splash geo. Again, it's using those animated geometry splashes. So wherever a raindrop hits the surface of the ogre, we get this animated geometry splash as well. When it splashes, we get this effect here. We can see we actually split off a certain amount because I found I ended up with too many geometry splashes on the ogre. So this has just been used to remove a proportion of them, and we're just killing them off. We then rotate them to speed space follow, so that basically aligns them with the surface, and that was actually, the speed was set up here. We use shape instance, which is these splashes, geometries, splashes. We use this material, which is splash, and then we delete them by age 12 and so forth. So it works in the same way, basically, as the other system does. So we're using these splashes again here, as I said. Now, the particles that remain, they then go down here, and they get sent into here, which is statue seed droplets for dribble. It's a bit of a mouthful, but what it does is we use a speed by surface, and this is using the ogre statue, which you can see here. We've got it set up. We're actually using the render time statue, but we could actually use obviously the simpler ogre statue, and that would actually make this solve a little bit faster. We're using control speed continuously, so what that will do is it'll actually make the particles stick to the ogre's surface, and this is very interesting. It's not perfect though, so it's not necessarily the perfect solution for having particles stick to a surface. Something much better than that is, I think it's called the bond operator on one of Oleg Baybordin's DVDs from the Particle Tools series by Orbaz. This adds a new operator which actually locks particles onto the surface, but they're also allowed to move, and that's actually very accurate. They don't leave the surface at all. Whereas using this particular trick, speed by surface, and using continuous speed control, it will lock them to the surface to a certain extent, but they do tend to drift off it. Now, in this particular example, that doesn't really matter that much, so it works fine in this particular circumstance. So we've got this particle which is actually only allowed to move along the surface of the statue, so we're simulating water moving down the surface. We've then got gravity and we've got wind, so that the particle doesn't move down in a straight line. The wind will actually give us some wind effect on the particle as it dribbles down the surface, and it also gives us a turbulent effect on the particle, so we get a nice organic feeling as it dribbles down. We've then got a collision detection going on, and we're using U-deflector and we're using the low-res ogre. And the reason for that is that, as I said, the speed by surface system isn't perfect, and it will tend to drift. It'll either drift off the surface, which is not too bad, but sometimes it'll drift into the surface, which is pretty bad because you then can't see the particles anymore. So in this case I'm using a deflector, and that stops the particles from going through the ogre. We've got a deflector with a ground. When the particle reaches the ground, it causes a splash, and it gets sent over here to the splash system. In reality, probably you wouldn't want to splash. Maybe you'd want to just die, I think. So probably the better thing to do would actually be to have that come off here into a delete operator.